Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you all from Christchurch. Cabinet met via Zoom today to review Auckland's Covid-19 alert level. The Auckland cluster became New Zealand's biggest ever, with 179 cases attached to it. However, it is one that all signs point to now being under control. There have been no new cases within that cluster for 10 days, only one case in the past 2 weeks, and only 5 people from the cluster are yet to recover. According to research undertaken by Te Pūnaha Matatini, there is now a 95% probability of the cluster being eliminated. A recent group of 6 cases linked to the border from a person who completed managed isolation and had a negative day 3 and day 12 tests has highlighted how cases can be rapidly identified, traced, tested and contained without any change to alert levels or the restrictions that go with that. It has now been 12 days since a confirmed case associated with this cluster, with only one person who still has the virus, and we are confident it too has been contained. Much was at stake with this resurgence of COVID. Second waves around the world have led to more deaths and illnesses and ongoing economic restrictions that have placed lives and livelihoods at risk. It was a test of our plan. Just as our team came together to deliver a world-leading response to the first wave of COVID, we did so again with the second. I know for many this one has felt harder, especially for Aucklanders. It was more fragmented with different parts of the country at different levels, and it felt longer and dragged on in what was already starting to feel like a very long year. But despite that, Aucklanders and New Zealanders stuck to the plan that has worked twice now and beat the virus again. Our team of 5 million, a little more battle-weary this time, did what national teams do so often. We put our heads down and we got on with it. You only have to look around the world to see the alternative to our approach here in New Zealand. Cases continue to surge, with the World Health Organization reporting almost 35 million cases and over 1 million deaths worldwide. The UK reported over 12,000 new cases on Saturday and has placed limits on gatherings of no more than 6 in order to halt their most recent spread. All workers who can work from home have been encouraged to do so through their winter, which takes them through to the end of the year and beyond. And that is the case in many other parts of Europe also. These measures have largely been absent in New Zealand for some weeks now. Even under Alert Level 3, the Treasury estimated economic activity was at 80 to 85% of what is usual, and in recent weeks at Level 2 have revised the number up to 90 to 94% of normal activity. We've seen the strength of our economy in recent weeks through jobs, exports, building consents and traffic updates. More than 9,000 filled jobs were added across the country in August. Our merchandise exports rose nearly 9% over the month, driven by our farmers and growers delivering dairy, kiwi fruit and meat to the world. Annual building consents remained near record highs in August, which means developers have the confidence to invest and get on with their work. Traffic movements and card spending analysed by the Treasury shows that when Auckland went to 2.5, activity in the rest of New Zealand and the Auckland region as a whole returned to what was previously seen under Level 1. However, I know that recent months have been challenging for many Auckland businesses, especially those in hospitality, retail, tourism and the arts. But when we quickly stamp this virus out, our economy is able to return close to normal quicker. The Oxford University COVID tracker continues to position us favourably compared to the likes of the US, UK, Australia, Japan and Canada when it comes to how stringent our restrictions are. At levels 2 and 1, New Zealand is one of the most open countries and economies in the world. We're one of the few where you can gather in any numbers you like, go to work with limited or no restrictions, and watch sport in full stadiums, like we will this Sunday in the Bledisloe Cup opener. So, on the basis of the success and effectiveness of our elimination strategy, and on the advice of the Director-General of Health, Cabinet has confirmed that Auckland will join the rest of New Zealand at Alert Level 1 from 11:59pm this Wednesday, the 7th of October. As we come together again as a country in Level 1, we can let ourselves once again feel pride that we managed to get to that position together. COVID will be with us for many months to come, but we should still mark these milestones. But as is ever, my responsibility is also to forewarn. Resurgence of the virus is not our only worry. Resurgence of complacency is right up there too. Daily use of the COVID Tracer app has halved from a peak of 2 million scans to 1 million in the past week. Given that there are 3.9 million New Zealanders aged over 18 years old, at most that means only a quarter is scanning every day. In real life, that complacency means that in the event of a future outbreak, we may not be able to contact you as quickly, get you tested or into isolation, and as a result, we could possibly see the virus spread further faster. At Level 1, it is still a requirement that businesses display the QR code, so please do keep checking in. The other area we can't become complacent on is testing. Recent modelling shows us that if we test 35% of people with COVID-like symptoms, then any new community outbreak would likely be a small one, limited to fewer than 50 cases. The low rates of testing back in July, when we were enjoying the freedoms of Level 1, could well have been part of the reason we didn't pick up the outbreak sooner. We all want to avoid more restrictions. Our public health systems are getting stronger all the time, but to stay at Level 1 relies on all of us continuing to be vigilant and playing our part. Whenever you are in New Zealand, keep using the app, scan in everywhere you go, and remind the people you are with to do the same. If you are even slightly unwell, stay home, ring Healthline and get a test. Avoiding another outbreak depends on each and every one of us, and we all have a role to play. Over the past couple of weeks, I've travelled the country. Everywhere I go, COVID is at the top of people's minds. Almost without exception, people are proud of our collective achievements in eliminating the virus. Grateful for the wage subsidy that has sustained jobs, and looking forward to the economic opportunities now available to us off the back of our COVID success. We are talking to Australia about the travel bubble, and we're looking to join this arrangement as soon as it proves itself safe to do so. My message to New Zealanders remains the same as it always has been, though. We are in a good position because we went hard and we went early. We have a plan to continue responding to COVID-19, and we will apply the same rigour to our economic recovery as we did to our world-leading health response. Every test of our plan, of our systems, makes us stronger, better, more resilient to a virus that will be with the world for some time to come. Happy to take your questions. No, at the time that Cabinet made that decision, it was about seeing through that additional cycle of the virus, which takes us through to Wednesday as well, but also, of course, about gazetting. So we didn't want to make that in-principle decision. We wanted, again, to have all that data. It also allowed us the benefit of having the 12-day test results from that more recent outbreak as well. Of course, the public transport orders relate to Level 2. But what I would encourage people to consider is ongoing use of all of the tools that we've learned along the way that make a difference to people. So scanning QR codes. Please continue to scan into everywhere that you visit. If you're having a social gathering, make a note of the people that you are with. Wash your hands, and definitely, without question, stay home if you are sick and get a test. Those are the really critical measures at Level 1. We do want to create a culture of people being willing to use masks, but we haven't got an order for them at level 1. Yeah. Yes, absolutely a decision for them. You'll see that they've continued to do so through this more recent period where it's only been a requirement for travel in and out of Auckland, but absolutely a matter for them. I can see why they would make that decision. It, of course, adds to a bit of resilience in their network as well. I would need to, well, for Air New Zealand specifically. No, so the recommendation from the Director General was QR code use, testing, and staying home if you're sick. Those, and of course the public health messaging around washing hands. Those continue to be the primary focus, but particularly the testing. I can't put enough emphasis on that. We know from Flu Tracker that people are still experiencing cold and flu symptoms. We need those people to get tested. That helps us get in front of the virus and any potential spread of it. The sooner we can detect it in people, but we really require people to get tested. I don't want anyone to think because we're at level 1 that now means that COVID is absolutely absent from New Zealand. It means there's no sign of it currently, but we need to keep up that vigilance around testing. Well, you see, actually, that's even the criteria that Queensland is using for opening up borders to New South Wales. So we're not alone in having that criteria. 28 days is obviously a bit of a benchmark that other countries use as well as New Zealand to demonstrate that it would be safe or have less risk. That's not the only thing we'll be looking for. You'll see over the weekend, a case reported of someone who travelled in on a trans-Tasman flight. They were coming from the UK, but were on that leg of an Australian-New Zealand flight, and they've tested positive. It just demonstrates how important it is to have completely separate transit flights between Australia and New Zealand and other countries. Those who are working at border, and particularly we of course have protocols for those who are working at the border. So maritime, there are strict protocols around those who are coming in from overseas and are on vessels that haven't been at sea for long periods of time. They are monitored by customs to make sure they're not coming off their vessels. So we do have very strict protocols in those high-risk areas, including for those who may come into contact with those who are from high-risk areas. But yes, there are extra things we ask of our staff at MIQ. For instance, even guidelines around when they return home and washing the clothes they've worn that day, contact with family members when they first come home. So those kinds of messages are specific to those workers. Well, Again, for those workers, we apply extra rigour around, of course, PPE use, testing of those workers, and guidance around what they can do to keep themselves and their family members safe. And of course, the testing is part of that as well. But again, keeping in mind, this first outbreak, we have still not been able to ascertain its origin. Many countries who have had resurgence, and the likes of Germany, have not been able to ascertain its origin. Vietnam hasn't been able to ascertain. So from the small examples we've seen recently, the use of rubbish bins or a lift, you can see how easy it can be to come in contact, which is why general testing across the country, we are asking people to maintain that. Do not assume that anywhere that you, because you live outside of a centre, that we don't want you to be tested. We do. At the moment, from the experts are saying 95% confidence, but again, with smaller clusters, it's sometimes harder to be able to model, but you can see high confidence, and that's the reason we're moving. We only do that when the experts and the evidence say we can have a level of confidence to move to level 1. People should make choices for themselves on this. I do want to build a culture where we encourage people to look after one another and keep each other safe. And so while there isn't an order there in place, that people should feel free to take whatever precautions they think make them feel more comfortable being in large environments. We definitely want people scanning. We want people taking note of where they are sitting. We want people washing their hands. And we definitely do not want you to attend if you are unwell. These are your acts of public service now. You'd have to ask members of the public that question rather than me. You know, what I do think that we cannot take for granted that what we did in New Zealand is what anyone would have done or what any country would have done. No, we made choices as a government to adopt this plan, and New Zealanders supported it. That is what's made the difference. Frankly, I have seen positions, however, from the opposition that suggest to me that they may not have chosen that path. And so I would say that we shouldn't put our progress at risk because borders, for instance, remain critical. And some of the proposals I've seen around the borders, frankly, I think would be risky.
What do you think about
Yeah, so there has been progress around alternative testing methods, whether it's high turnaround time or ease of collection. So spit testing, for instance. Work is being done in New Zealand around alternative testing methods. Something really important to keep in mind, though, New Zealand is looking for the same sensitivity and reliability for new testing options that we currently have. Many countries are looking for a form of screening and surveillance. We require very sensitive testing because of our strategy. We can't afford to let one positive result through the net. And so that does mean that we've got a different standard than others might. Work has been done on whether or not we can get that level of sensitivity for some of the testing that's available. That's been done by ESR as we speak, particularly around spit testing. It could well. We just need the same sensitivity as those testing. There's some calibration going on at the moment around the spit testing. So I expect it will be available in New Zealand, but we've got to make sure that it has the same reliability as what we're using at the moment. Particularly will be useful for the border testing. I consider myself agnostic, as many of you will know because I've spoken openly about it. I was raised in a religious household. I've always been proud of my upbringing, but I now consider myself agnostic. You know, I've never got into the habit of commenting on other people's personal beliefs, and I don't intend to start now. Yes, I have seen it, and I think, frankly, it would take us back to the 1990s. And by that I mean I think it would take us back away from delivering housing for first home buyers, away from increasing public housing numbers. I mean, to suggest that as an answer to the housing troubles that New Zealand has experienced, that we should sell off state houses, I think is absolutely wrong. Well, first thing I would say is that, of course, we initiated significant work on the RMA when we came into government, recognising that work was required there. And that's now what you're seeing us talk about this election campaign. The second thing we've done is fast-track consenting as part of our COVID recovery and response. The third thing we're doing is seeing what we can do to speed up, particularly consenting for kāinga ora for state housing. We think that will make a difference too. Yeah, supply. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and look, this is our intent with RMA reform, to make it simpler, to make it less costly, but actually to still get, to ensure that we have the environmental protections that a community expects. So we are doing that work, and at the same time have made already inroads through fast-tracking consenting right now. I'll give you a chance to also speak to Minister Woods on that as well. It is fair to say, of course, that state housing, this is often the last opportunity for housing. And so we have to be mindful of that, that often, we'll be dealing with situations where, for a range of reasons, this is the last housing option for people. At the same time, no one wants a negative effect for those living around an individual where there have been issues. And so our view is that has to be worked through and managed well. One of the things that we lost from the last government is often in state housing developments of large scale, we often had support networks within that community. I know a specific development in Auckland that used to have a permanent presence of someone there, and that was lost under the last government. That's the way to deal with those social issues, and that is something that we've been reinstating. We've announced our dental policy. We do believe that for vulnerable New Zealanders in particular, that they weren't able to access dental health care, and that was causing much longer term costly health issues. So we've extended the grant that they're able to access. What we also want to do is improve the access of under 18-year-olds who already can access it for free but aren't. Well, I haven't seen the criteria for under what circumstances, of course, but from what you've described to me, our view is that by extending that grant access, many are only accessing the dentist, of course, when they're triggered by something. That grant access would enable them to get up to $1,000 worth of dental support. Look, on dental, I think we all want more accessible dental care in New Zealand. We do. But we also have to accept that we've inherited a health system where we have poor cancer care, where we've needed to increase access to drug funding. We have a number of issues with our hospitals. We have had to prioritise. We're making great inroads, but for dental it's been step by step. It doesn't strike me that it seems to be there. It strikes me that it is there. Look, when you're campaigning, you can't be cavalier. We are here in the middle of a campaign that will be about our economic recovery. And my pitch to New Zealanders is that we cannot afford to risk changing course right now, particularly when the two opposition parties in this campaign have $8 billion holes that they cannot account for. That, to me, says that their economic plans are risky.
With Labour's nation's full business case, but is it right to sort of bank the benefits of being 100% new with the Labour policy without fully accounting for the cost?
Yeah. Look, on the 100% renewable, we have had a goal of moving towards 100% renewable for some time. We've brought forward that goal. We've said there are a number of means to get there. One has been potentially the Onslow project. Others have been smaller hydro projects. And of course, we expect significant technological advancement that will help us reach that goal as well. We are now doing the work on which will take us there. I think National know full well what they're claiming here and what should be accounted for in the meantime is wrong, because on their logic, they have a significant hole in their own budget. Just last week, I saw posters advertising their commitment to the second harbour crossing. I see no accounting for that in their budget. Okay, Thomas, I'll finish with you, and then I'll check whether or not we've got I'm sorry, I haven't scanned over to my right. Then I'll check whether or not there's any questions for the ministers I have with me. Otherwise, we've also got the stadium announcement. Nothing that we've done here is unusual. We have absolutely followed the usual accounting protocols for projects. No final decision has been taken, no costing has been undertaken, and so it would be highly unusual to bank a project that at this stage has none of that detail attached to it, nor any agreement as to whether or not that will be the project that takes us to that aspiration. So again, nothing unusual about what we've done in our fiscal plan, totally within the expectations of what Treasury would do. That is completely counter to what we've seen with National's plan, where there is a legitimate hole that we're yet to see accounted for. And then I'm going to come over here, if I may, Toga. You know, you've already seen us move, you know, with pace, doubling transitional housing, rolling out that housing first for homelessness, looking at, and we already have fast-tracked RMA consenting that will enable projects to get underway as well. Doubling, as I said, transitional housing and an extra 8,000 public houses. We are treating housing with urgency. Compare that to the National Party, who are proposing that we sell state housing. Yes. Well, look, I'd have to say, to declare our democracy crazy, which essentially that seems to be a commentary around, I'd say is wrong. Look, political parties have the right to campaign. Voters decide whether they meet the threshold to enter Parliament. But again, this campaign, we haven't done deals. We've just got on with campaigning for Labour, and that's what I'm sticking with. Oh, yeah, I think I'm going to. Well, Labour's always had a position on that, and it remains the same. Okay, I'll bring up. Can I just gauge whether or not there's a desire to have Minister Robertson and Minister Woods? They won't take it personally if you don't. No? Okay, we'll leave that to the next announcement. I'll call time now, thank you. Last question. I feel this is not an example of how I parent, I should say. Yes. Yes, I am familiar with the show. I have seen past pieces on it. Of course, you know, over a number of years, I understand it's been very popular in the UK. And so, yes, I've seen it. I'm glad that I whipped Neve away from watching it just in time near the end there. Yep. I was surprised by the emphasis on the ginger crunch. All right, thank you, everyone. Did I hear was there... Thank you.
In terms of the number of invoices that we've issued, yes, that is something that I am getting reporting on. Of course, none of those invoices are actually at their end due date yet, because there was a 90-day payment period. We have had some payments coming through, and the correct number of invoices have been issued, but it's a 90-day payment period on those. Oh, look, I mean, there is a clear process that's set up. They're assessed by officials on the merits of the case, and I have no reason to think that they're not being assessed according to each and every individual case. Thank you.
Sorry, this question's especially Sorry, so the question? Look, as the Prime Minister's already said, opposition parties have now got each an $8 billion hole. They have to be able to put up a credible plan. They've failed to use the right numbers again. There's some very questionable assumptions in here. But what makes it even worse is that what underpins that are cuts in the basic public services that New Zealanders rely on. I mean, if you look at ACT's policy, it's got cuts to the winter energy payment and working for families and interest-free loans. And the only pathway that is possible for National is through ACT. And so both National and ACT have to take responsibility not only for the mistakes that they've made, but also for the cuts to public services that would be required. It's very hard to tell, but they did put in a sum of money within there, I think close to $1 billion, and much of the PGF has been allocated, and presumably this is another example to go with Judith Collins's desire to change the law to take the wage subsidy back from people who legitimately used it. That kind of undermining of business confidence, I think, is taken very seriously by the business community. Yeah, so obviously in the pre-fu it took us up to the end of the financial year, and I think we're up to about 19 billion at that point. Clearly there's been more since that time as well. I mean, you've got examples of things like PPE, where that money is continually being paid out in AX numbers that presumably would somehow have to be clawed back. That's done on a monthly basis through the accounts, and I'd have to get you the latest numbers, Thomas. I don't have them with me. Well, obviously we put it in place now, and we'll see how it goes, having just recently passed that legislation. Ultimately, the thing that we all want is to get the reform done so that we don't have to put stopgap measures in. Through this period of time, David Parker's led some excellent work. The Randerson report has given us a template that we're now committed to implementing, but we'll see how the fast tracking goes and whether or not there need to be any tweaks or extensions, potentially, but it's only just come in. Okay, everyone. Claire, anything from you? No.